Hello, Diocese of San Bernardino. My name is David Wells and this is part 2 of 3 short videos for your Faith Day. I hope you enjoy them. Big shout out to Dr. Samuel Torres, of course, who invited me to be part of your day. In part 2, I want to build on the first video. If you remember, I explored the idea that it's possible for us to shrink into a list of our own making, that over time our how to do our job becomes our why we do the job, until one day we're just a list of unfinished tasks. And of course that makes us feel restless. It's in such a climate that we can lose our patience, our joy, our enthusiasm, our commitment. This is a primary homily of Pope Francis. One of the things he reminds us is that our virtue is vulnerable. So it's possible when we're under pressure, when we work hard, to lose our virtue, to lose the very reasons we came into the job in the first place. And then the how takes over and we become pretty obsessed with procedure, with strategy, and it isn't long before we're simply following the rules. Now, none of these things make us bad people, but they make us tired and weary, and sometimes they can make us cynical. So if we weren't born for the list, if the list isn't our why, well, what is our why? It's a really good question to stay close to, because the why gets bullied by the how, folks, and it isn't long before the how takes over. So one of the things I wanted to share with you really was this sense in which the church, the Catholic Church, has developed a profound why over 2,000 years of history. And I'm not asking you to believe necessarily everything David Wells believes, but what I do want you to do is to have a real grasp of why the school you are in was built and what its why is, because it's rooted in the teaching of the church, in the scriptures and in the lives of the saints. And it's good fun, really, to be honest. So what is the why and how can it help us? Well, the first thing is just to be aware. On a bad day, let's say that your data and your performance indicators are down. Let's say that the work you're doing isn't bearing much fruit. Meanwhile, you've had a couple of maybe inconsiderate or rude letters from parents, and maybe you're just beginning to wonder why you're in this in the first place. Well, I promise you that the next morning when you get out of bed, you're not going to jump out of the bed enthusiastic because you've got a list of jobs to do. You're more likely to do that if you're tuned into the why of our work. Why bother? Why carry on? Why work hard? Those questions help us when we're tired, weary, burnt out and cynical. They help us during a pandemic. So the why is practical. It just gets pushed behind the list of how. So, in the Catholic Church, we have a tradition that goes back hundreds of years. St. Irenaeus wrote beautifully, "The glory of God is a person fully alive." And a person fully alive is educated. I mean, it's an interesting prospect if you think about it, that education in the tradition of the church gives life. When you teach a child how to run faster, when you teach a child another language, when you teach a child the relationship of numbers or the origin of the planets, what you're actually introducing a child to is who they can be. Knowledge gives life, and the glory of God is a child or a young person in your class thriving. That's why we built Catholic schools, to give life to the world. You would never build a Catholic school anywhere without teaching them everything. A Catholic school isn't like all the other schools, but it's got this RE department and a bit of holy prayer at the beginning. Education, according to the Catholic Church, is holy in that it makes us whole. Without it, we don't flourish. And what lies at the heart of all of this is the dignity of everybody, the dignity of the human person. Pope Francis reminds us in his document Laudato Si, he says, each one of us is willed. We're not an accident. Each one of us is loved. And each one of us is necessary. Now, those three facts combined work like this. A child or a young person in your class isn't there to prove themselves. They're not there to prove that they're clever. They're not there to pass the test, as important as those things are. The person in your class is there to come into contact with their own dignity and worth. That's why we educate. Now, the tests are there to help us prepare young people for the world, but they're not our why. The data is not our why. The performance of the young people in your class is not our why. What matters to a Catholic education is the dignity of the human person. We want you to enjoy your job, and we want the children in your class to enjoy you enjoying your job. And it's not like that all the time. I understand that. Now, the problem in life, of course, is that it's not quite as simple as that. This was brought home to me one day when I was on the tube. You know the tube? So under London, we have thousands and thousands of miles of underground tunnels. The train system, the subway, that gets people back and from work. And in that network of train tunnels, I'm sitting one hot day in July. It's about 6 p.m. on a Friday evening. I'm sitting on the tube, and opposite me are three young women. They'd be in their early 20s, right? And they're beautiful, and they've spent a while getting ready. You can tell they're going for a night out in the town. And while they're sitting on these seats opposite me, they're having a laugh. You know, they're really laughing and enjoying themselves. And I'm watching them and I'm thinking how powerful and strong they are. I remember looking at them and thinking, the world can't hold these women down, right? There's nothing that can push them back, because they were so strong and so full of joy. And then one of them threw out a camera, right? Held it aloft like so. And they all tilted their heads 5 degrees, like that. And then they all went serious and they sucked in their cheeks. And then they started pouting their lips. And I was watching them. And I was thinking, what's just happened to you a minute ago? Nothing in the world could have held you back. But now you've constructed a weird world in which you don't even look yourself. Now, for Pope Francis, this is a real danger. Writing to young people, he said, becoming a saint, he said, means becoming more fully yourself. In fact, what Catholic education should do is help young people to find out who they are, what they're capable of, and to be that person. That's what it's all about. Pope Francis said in Christus Vivit, he said, don't be a photocopy. Don't just be like everybody else. Why? Because if you copy other people, he said, you'll deprive the earth and heaven too of something that nobody else on the planet can give. We were built as Catholic communities to enable young people to have the confidence to know that they were willed and loved before they passed the test, and that their destiny is to become who God meant them to be. Not a kind of false version of who they'd like to be, but rather to be themselves and to be that person authentically. St. Catherine of Siena wrote back in, oh my goodness, the Middle Ages, a letter 368 to Stefano Marconi, and she wrote in that letter, be who God meant you to be and you will set the world on fire. Be who God meant you to be and you're unstoppable. So the Catholic education system is not built as a school to ram religion into people. It's to help to draw out the authentic person, the person who God meant that child or that young person to be, so that they can flourish. In fact, that's the Church's real definition of conversion. to become the person God meant you to be and to be that person with joy. Otherwise, what happens is we become what John Shea describes. He says the bottom line is of conversion is that it's the discovery of who we truly are. This coming home about the truth about who we are is better than any of the other substitutes or versions of ourselves that we invent. Catholic education is meant to be enjoyed because it's about dignity, it's about being fully alive, and it's about being authentic. When we get those things right, people thrive in our classes and they pass the tests. Which is why in a document called Gaudium et Exsultate, Gaudium et Exsultate, written by Pope Francis, he said, don't be afraid of holiness. Right? It's not going to turn you into a false version of yourself. You're not going to have to pretend to be holy. He says it'll take away none of your energy or your vitality of your joy. On the contrary, he said, you will become what the Father had in mind when he created you, and you will be faithful to who you really are. It's your best chance, folks, of being happy. So education, whether it's the teaching of modern languages or artistry or science, whether it's athleticism, or whether it's the very ability to be still, however we educate people, we are opening up horizons all the time to who they are, what their capabilities are, and the difference that they can make. And when we do that, we do a good job. I love all this because it's a better reason to get out of bed than simply trying to be the best school. No Catholic school was built anywhere in the world to be better than another one. That's not our reason. This is not some kind of game in which there's winners and losers. On the contrary, our skill is not to take ourselves too seriously, but in fact to take the task itself very seriously, to tune into the why. My dad was very good at this. Before he died, we knew he was dying, and so we had some really good conversations. And in one of the conversations, I said to my dad, of all the things you taught us, what do you most want us to remember when you're not here to tell us anymore? I was lucky to ask that question. And he came out with a great answer. He said to me, David, don't take yourself too seriously. And then he added, you're going to die. I love that. All right. So the task, the why of Catholic education is a worthy and noble task indeed. We are enabling children and young people to walk out of our schools on the last day, confident in who they are, enabled to know the difference that they can make and to be skilled in the preparation for that task. It's really about building people up so that they can live life to the full. That lies at the heart of our understanding. Remember St. Irenaeus, the glory of God is a pupil in your class flourishing, a student in your school who knows themselves, knows the difference that they can make and does so joyfully. When we do that, the world has a better chance at peace, and you and I have a better chance of enjoying ourselves. Perhaps one of the most salient reminders to me was that after teaching in a school for 8 years, and I really liked it, I came to leave. And as I was leaving, I took a little walk around the school for the last time, just to say goodbye in a way. And when I got back to my office, the school janitor, the caretaker, the site manager, had unscrewed my name off my office door. It took me 8 years to get that office, and it took him 2 minutes to unscrew my name. But as I was walking out of that school, one of the kids had stayed behind. And awkwardly at first, he stood to attention and then said, Mr. Wells, and I realised he'd got a little speech. And he said, Sir, I liked you, said, thanks, Martin. That means a lot. You see, in the end, it's not about accolades and performance. It's about relationships. And that boy taught me what it was really about. You see, we can take the name off our office doors very quickly. But for him and me, what we did, what we learnt together, that was eternal. And that's why we built the school. That story is about all of us. You just have to change his name, and it's true of you too. It's true of all of us. So to close, here's a few questions. Number one, why did you choose to work in a Catholic school? I mean, don't go. This is not meant to be an interview. I mean, why? Just be honest. It doesn't have to be for the reasons I've said. Question number two, has your why got a bit lost behind the endless lists of things to do? If I asked you, why are you a teacher, or why do you work in a school, could you give me an answer to that question? And number three, does your why sound anything like the why I just gave from the Catholic tradition? It's not a test, I'm just curious. Enjoy the question, and I'll be back soon for part 3.